So I'm going to read a rather long passage for our starting this morning. It's long for a pretty good reason. This is the opening of the report to the board of the Unitarian Universalist Association by the Article 2 Study Commission. So I'm going to just remind you what that is. There's a little bit of info in the charge itself, but a few years ago, we began as a denomination to review our purposes and principles, which are in Article 2 of our bylaws. This is the charge from the UUA board to the Article 2 Study Commission. The Article 2 Study Commission is hereby charged to review Article 2 of the UUA bylaws and propose any revisions that will enable our UUA, our member congregations, and our covenanted communities to be a relevant and powerful force for spiritual and moral growth, healing, and justice. Proposed changes should articulate core UU theological values. The board believes that one core theological value shared widely among UUs is love. The Commission on Appraisal in its report, and this continues the charge, this is still the charge. The Commission on Appraisal in its report Engaging Our Theological Diversity cites Robert Miller's study of Unitarian Universalism, stating that UUs ranked loving as an instrumental value and mature love as a terminal value more highly than did respondents from other groups, religious and non-religious alike. Dr. Cornell West says that justice is what love looks like in public. Our commitment, and again, this is still the UUA board telling the Article 2 Study Commission what to do. Our commitment to personal, institutional, and cultural change rooted in anti-oppression, anti-racism, and multiculturalism values and practices is love in action and should be centered in any revision of Article 2. The new principles and purposes should guide us in the transformation of ourselves, our communities, and our faith into active networks of collective care, restoration, and justice. The principles and purposes you will prepare, and they have proposed those revisions this last week, the final version went to the board, should be a living document that challenges Unitarian Universalists to place the liberation in all its dimensions of all at the center of our lives. They should be honest about our past, name what we are facing and our aspirations and where we hope to be, not just for today, but looking out at the horizons. They should ask us to choose love in action as the path forward. So, that's just an excerpt from a much longer report. You can look at that report and it shows you how the Article 2 Commission has suggested ways we can center love at the center of everything we do as a movement. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Love not only at the core of our tradition, but as the very core of our tradition.
It's now time for us to take morning offering, which is a very active, concrete way of loving this congregation, this church, and also our Share the Plate partner, which is Bridges, the group helping people coming out of prison.
So that is a big word that we love, that we are going to hear a lot in the next few weeks. I've started to see the chocolate commercials and the jewelry commercials for Valentine's Day already. Valentine's Day is but minutes away. The UUA is having its 30 days plus of love. But we're not exactly sure what we mean when we say the word love. What does the word love mean? It's gotten clear to me in conversations I've been having with many of you over the last few weeks that there are a lot of complexities to what we mean when we say this word. Our understandings, our definitions, our experiences, and our conditioning around the word, they cover a lot of theological and emotional and psychological ground. We each mean something very specific when we think of or say, or maybe don't say, the word love. When I say love, it carries with it all the associations and the memories of my life. Some of them the most important and the most personal memories I have. And that's true for all of us. When we say the word love, we think of all the things in our lives that we associate with that. So the little word, those 4 little words, can mean a lot of things. And they can kind of undo us sometimes. Those 4 little letters can really cause us to have a lot of thoughts and feelings. Now, the ancient Greeks had a sort of wisdom about this concept. And they didn't have just one word for the range of concepts we mean when we use the word love in English. They had a bunch of different words to describe specific different varieties of love. So we're going to start by talking about some of those words. So the one that we think of the most often, especially around Valentine's Day, when we say the word love, the word they would use is eros. Romantic love, falling in love, right? That's the kind that often is associated with, oh, I'm so in love, I don't know what to do, I can't think straight, right? And is sort of associated with a certain kind of loss of control. That's eros. Now, another kind of love they talked about was philia, which is affection, which is kind of like eros, but not quite as dramatic. Philia is something that can mean platonic love. Love that is not really physical attraction, but romantic in a certain kind of way. Love is involved. Maybe it's a friendship, maybe it's more than that, but it's affectionate. Another word they used for love, selfless, universal love, was agape. That kind of love is bigger than ourselves, unconditional, a boundless compassion and infinite empathy to anyone, anywhere. This can be extended to people you know, people you don't know, people you like, people you don't like. Other religious traditions associate what we would maybe call agape with divine love. Another kind of love is storge, which is love of family. It's kinship-based, right? Parents and children love each other. Brothers and sisters love each other. We might feel that kind of love also for a place or a group, right? You might feel that kind of, if people say, I love West Side, which I hope you say once in a while. If you say that, that would be storge in action. Now, there's another kind of love that's called mania, obsessive love, and that can be a little bit, I was thinking of Vols fans when I was reading about this one, okay? That's mania. And there are, of course, much more dramatic examples of it, though. I don't know. After some of the games this year, it looked pretty much like crazy mania, okay? Ludus, playful love. We might use the word infatuation, where they would use the word ludus. It's having a crush. It's having a crush on someone, being silly with love. Pragma is enduring love. It's love built on commitment, on understanding and long-term best interests, right? It's love that has aged and matured, and it's about making compromises to help the relationship work over time. It's about tolerance and patience. But you hear the word pragmatic there. It's pragma. Okay. And also, one that maybe we're starting to talk about more in our culture, but we didn't for a really long time, philotia, self-love. The Greeks understood that in order to care for others, we first have to learn to care for ourselves. So love of self is its own necessary form of love. So there's all these different kinds of love. Loving myself, loving the people in my family, loving my community, having a crush on someone. These are all different. So I'm going to read the list really quick again, and I'm just going to invite you to think about which ones you've put your attention on the most, or which ones, when you say the word love, which one are you thinking of, or ones? So there's eros, romantic love. Philia, which is affectionate. Sometimes we might call that brotherly or sisterly love, not meaning family, but philia, affection. Agape, selfless universal love. Storge, love of actual family or patriotism or allegiance. Mania. Ludus, playful love. Pragma, enduring, mature, wise love. And philotia, self-love. So, which ones are you familiar with? Which ones do you assume we mean when we say the word love? And is there a hierarchy in your mind about which ones are better or more important or less important? Certainly our society, and certainly coming up the next few weeks, they're going to be telling us which one is the highest priority, which is eros. At the core of the concept of certainly our modern use of the word love, and often throughout human history, love has correlated to intimacy, close personal connections and relationships. And that can get us kind of tangled up when we start hearing the UUA charge the board with insisting that our whole movement be based on love. If we don't have nuances in our definitions of love, that can get a little tricky. We are generally, as a culture, focused on love for people we know well, trust, are close to, have some kind of intimate bond with. And even that can sometimes be a little overwhelming for us, right? It seems to me that we associate sometimes that kind of closeness or intimacy or personal connection with loss of self. So think about that for a minute. It's often not conscious, but often unconsciously, we have an association between saying, I love you, with somehow compromising or possibly having to compromise ourselves. But maybe that's not true. But you certainly see a lot in the advertising about what you have to buy, or how you have to look, or what you have to do to prove that you're loving. If we're focused primarily on a definition of love as eros, passionate love, or even storge, familial love, or pragma, enduring love based in commitment, those all have a tendency to make us focus on something about our individuality, even unconsciously. They may imply a loss of control or giving oneself over to another person, to their wishes rather than our own. So there we find ourselves in the perpetual human dilemma that I heard someone say once, that this is sort of the core human dilemma, and I've come to think it's true. The dilemma of wanting to be autonomous individuals and also wanting to belong at the same time. The struggle, the dynamic tension between being me and being in relationship with others, right? A core human dilemma. So So with those kinds of questions and associations kind of in the back of our minds, saying we love someone, well, it can get a little complicated. It can feel trite, like we don't actually mean it, because we think love means certain things, and we say it, but we're not really committing to all that stuff. Or it can mean so much that we won't say it at all. The thing that I find interesting about the Greek's list here is that last one I read, philotia. It seems to me that self-love is at the center of our ability to manage all the other kinds. So, how many of us, you do not have to raise your hands at this, how many of us are good at practicing philotia, self-love? And I want to make a really important distinction here. When I say self-love, I don't mean self-confidence. Because self-confidence and big self-esteem are often rooted in trying to prove something. That's the opposite of self-love. Not that self-confidence is bad. Self-confidence is wonderful, but it's not always a sign of self-love. Sometimes being weak and needy is the best sign of self-love. So think about that for a minute. How good are we at practicing self-love? Self-love is deep devotion and commitment to one's own authentic, flawed, beautiful, magical, fragile, strong, imperfect, wonderful human self. So if you're going to imagine self-love, what you have to do is you have to imagine yourself like you would those cute puppies on the YouTube videos, right? You have to put the feeling towards yourself. Matter of fact, a lot of therapists, if they're trying to teach someone self-love, will actually say, think of the cutest thing you can think of, and get that feeling all juiced up in your body. Now, picture yourself as the receiver of that feeling. Too often, what we try to tell ourselves is self-love is saying should a lot. So, what if self-love, the ability to love oneself unconditionally, is at the core of these other kinds of love? And here's where we get to the Article 2 part. I really believe that working on self-love is required to develop agape, selfless universal love, which is what the UUA is talking about. When we can feel that sort of kind and compassionate, gentle but strong acceptance and encouragement for our whole imperfect, struggling selves, once we do that, then we can start to turn that outward. Maybe to our partners, to our parents, our children, our neighbors, our family members, and even further out and out and out. I said to the choir the other night when we were talking about this, I said, when I heard about this sign being destroyed, my instinctive reaction was one of deep love for whomever destroyed the sign. Because I know that acts like that only come from deep pain and deep fear. And the agape response is compassion and love. Now, sometimes practicing agape towards the world teaches us some skills, right? It teaches us how to set good boundaries with love. Because often we think of love as being not really good boundaries. But you can have deep love and excellent boundaries at the same time. When we practice agape outward, it can also help us develop that skill of loving ourselves. Sometimes practicing, this is a kind of fake it till you make it kind of thing, right? If I can practice agape outward, I might start to get in the habit of turning it towards myself. We do that when we're compassionate or kind to others. We do that when we feel the urge to fight for justice. We do that when we long for equality and fairness. But here's the rub. Most of us are pretty comfortable saying compassion. Most of us are pretty comfortable saying fairness or kindness. But you throw the word love in there and it gets a little more personal and a little bit riskier. Practicing philatia, inward self-love, and agape, selfless universal love outwardly, includes accepting imperfection. And it also includes accepting downright mess-upness and awfulness. It means turning love towards messing up and awfulness. The human condition implies that we will all encounter and we will all be perpetrators of messing up and sometimes being kind of awful. That is part of being human. And we need to learn to be compassionate with ourselves first if we truly want to model compassion in the world. Now, it's good to work at getting better at things. This isn't a you can do anything kind of a love. It's good to hold one another accountable for actions that cause harm. But improvement and accountability can be rooted in love rather than judgment and fear. So I'm going to invite you to pause and think about that for a minute. What would accountability rooted in love look and feel like? You can set healthy boundaries with love and compassion. Last week, we talked about accountability. We talked about how one of the changes that our denomination is trying to make is to actually say, you know what, we're going to hold each other accountable for these things we say we care about. We're going to invite each other to be accountable for those things, for acting towards justice. And we talked about how it's really important to be able, in an accountable relationship, whether that's in this room or with the larger UU community or the larger communities fighting for justice. Accountability means being able to listen and hear when someone says, ouch, that hurt, I'm not okay with that, that wasn't okay. Or when someone says, I have a need, right? So being able to hear what might feel like criticism or a request for something more. Being able to hear those is much easier when we assume a foundation of love. Because that's trust, and that's what covenant is. The only kind of love that we can extend a long way with that kind of covenantal trust, it's agape, right? So what does that look like in a practical sense? It looks like showing up to help out at a family promise week. It looks like participating in a pride parade, even when that seems a little risky maybe. Volunteering at a food pantry. Donating resources to programs like the ones we're currently collecting for. Those are all acts of love. But the catch is this: once we call it love, we feel a little more accountable than we might otherwise feel if we left that word out. And that makes us feel a little more vulnerable. Adding love to the mix means committing to listening to the people we're exchanging interactions with. Sometimes it means showing up when we'd rather not. Sometimes it might mean hearing, you know, I appreciate the effort, but here's what would be easier or better for me. Unitarian Universalism is ultimately a covenantal community, not a transactional community. We say we covenant together as congregations. We covenant. So a covenant is a promise of the heart, not of the mind. Our minds are part of the story, but a covenant is a promise of the heart. In our modern consumer reality, it's really easy to interpret human interactions as investing when and where we feel the return is what we want. If we're dissatisfied, we find another provider. But that's not covenant. Covenant isn't like that. Covenant doesn't mean that you take whatever comes your way and just tolerate it. That's not what it means. Covenant means saying, I promise to show up, to work in respectful and loving ways to further this relationship and this community, even when it gets hard. It's a promise. So think about how thinking of that context makes it maybe a little bit easier to listen and hear. If I'm promising you, and I don't actually have a contract here as minister. I have a covenantal letter of agreement. Sometimes we call it a contract, but the truth of the matter is that we have a covenantal relationship. So if I'm promising you, and in our covenant you're promising me back, and we openly acknowledge that, within that context, accountability can be easier. We don't promise perfection. We don't promise to agree on things. We don't promise smooth sailing. That's not how it works, because we're people. But we promise to keep showing up in the spirit of love. It's really interesting. I was talking to some other clergy people this last week, because, of course, congregations all over the U.S. are talking about Article 2. And every congregation has its own unique problems and challenges with it. And I was telling some people, just some of the conversations we're having, and people said to me, well, almost every UU congregation has the same thing that they say at the beginning of their services, right? Love is the spirit of this church. I said, no, we don't say that. And they were like, what do you mean? Every UU church says, love is the spirit of this church. But no, not everybody says that. But what if we openly said, oh, this is a covenant, a loving covenant? It's something we're going to talk about a lot in the coming weeks. As Suzanne mentioned, David Howell is going to talk next week about another aspect of love. And on February 12th, some of the board members are going to be talking about what does love look like in our community? What does agape to the larger community look like? We'll be asking everyone who's here, virtually and in the room, to think about what kinds of agape are you comfortable with? What kinds of loving actions make sense to you? Now, we're going to talk just for a minute about one of the ways we're doing that right now, which is reproductive justice, supporting families. Today is the 49th anniversary of the Roe v. Wade decision. And there's a lot of struggle around that right now in our community. And as part of our covenant with you all, the board is trying to listen to what you think about supporting families of all different sizes and stripes and colors and all different stages, not just in reproductive access, but family care and care for people who are struggling to take care of their kids, and care for people who are making all kinds of decisions along the scope of families. So many of you have turned in surveys about that. That's the first layer of surveys. There's a team working on new surveys. And we had a really interesting conversation. I'm so grateful for the other members of that team. We were having a conversation the other day about creating the next survey. And we were talking about tough questions. And I was like, ooh, that question you're talking about, ooh, I'm nervous about asking them that one. And the other members of the team, thank you, Morgan, thank you, Curtis, said to me, Carol, you have to ask the question. I was like, ooh, it feels pain, like, ooh, there's pain, ooh, there's pain around some of these questions. I'm a little scared of what the answers will be. And they kept me accountable in the spirit of love. And I heard them in the spirit of, oh, these people, we have a covenant to do this together. And they said, it doesn't matter if this is uncomfortable and we're not going to make any decision, but we got to ask people the question. So see, because I know that I have a covenant of love with this community, and they know that they can trust to meet me in that spirit of love, they didn't hesitate to say, hey, hold up the boat there, cowgirl. What is this thing you're talking about, agape, and then you're not going to ask the question? Seriously? And I was like, oh, you're right. But y'all going to need to keep me strong while we do it. Okay? That's what it looks like. That's what covenant looks like. Think about what it would mean if we shifted just a little bit to that kind of assumption about our interactions. Okay? The welcoming congregation team, which we're used to thinking about as just LGBTQIA issues, is actually also shifting. We're shifting that word welcome to mean all sorts of things. We'd like to expand and hear your voices about what are the ways we should be more loving to the larger community. Because isn't welcome just a way of showing love? Isn't that what it means? It just means we meet you in the spirit of love, compassion. We're going to be nice to you, right? So we want to spread that across other justice concerns. We'd like to have you all consider virtually, whether you're listening to this today or next week, here in person, we'd like more people to participate on the welcoming team. We've been doing good work around LGBTQIA issues. We'd like to start also, as the board has asked us to do, be working on racial equity issues, environmental justice issues, right? Family justice issues. But not as projects, but as the spirit of love made alive in the world. What is it that Cornel West said? Let's go back and see what Cornel West said. He's a brilliant scholar, by the way. I strongly encourage you to read his work. Dr. Cornel West says that justice is what love looks like in public. That's what welcome means. What love looks like taken out into the public sphere. So covenant means we're in a relationship of commitment. We want to widen our circle. We want to be more loving. I invite you to think about that. I invite you to share your thoughts about that. I invite you to answer the surveys that'll be coming out. On the 12th, the board's going to be talking about what that might look like in our larger community. Think about what it might mean. There are lots of ways to show up. Some of them are very familiar to us, and some of them might be new. So, in the spirit of love, I invite you to challenge each other and yourselves to bring more intimacy, more vulnerability, and more trust into the work we do together. One of the other ways that we show up for one another that we would more easily call love in our tradition of being together is sharing our joys and concerns. Sharing what's going on for us. So we're going to take a few minutes now on that more personal level to just share whatever is in our hearts and minds. If you have something that's on your heart, in your mind, that you are want to share with the community, something you're celebrating, something you're struggling with, now is a time to do that. You are welcome to come up to this second microphone, say your name, and I will light a candle, and Morgan will be up at this microphone, and we'll alternate. If there are things that come in from the online community that we want to share, then Morgan will speak those out loud, and I will light candles for those.
Reverend Carol already mentioned my mother passed away today. Of course, we've been separated by a long distance for quite a long time. I hadn't been back to the UK since 2017. Something I wanted to share was that we didn't always see eye to eye on political issues. My mother was a consumer of the British equivalent of right-wing media, so sometimes we would have words about that. But towards the end of our relationship, things were able to change because I learned something more about myself. that quite often when there are things that we feel strongly about, it's because we have a deep fear about them. And on one occasion, when we were talking about something, an immigration issue in the UK, I was able to say to her, but you're safe. You have the things you need to live and the money that you need to do what you want to do with your life. And she was able to say, yes, that's true. And we didn't have to argue about that anymore. And I'm so pleased that that was the way that our relationship was towards the end. So thank you.
I had an exciting and very surprising email from my granddaughter, who is 20 and lives in Rochester, New York. She emailed me and said, I have friends in Atlanta that I'm going to go visit. Would it be all right with you if I stopped and visited with you for a couple of days and combine it with this trip to Atlanta? I was just amazed. And so she will be arriving at McGee Tyson Airport Valentine's Day, about 5:30, and stayed with me for 2 days. Then I got to drive her to Chattanooga, where the friends from Atlanta will be driving up north, and we're going to find some place where we're going to meet, and I'll pass her off, and then she'll fly home from Atlanta. So, I mean, this is so unexpected and such a wonderful surprise.
Good morning. Most of you here don't know me. I've not been here a long time, but I've actually been a member since the storefront days. Chris, I'm sorry for your loss. But while we celebrate sometimes the loss of ones that we love, we also celebrate what's happening. We all can celebrate what's happening to me. Carol married my son and his current wife back in April, and we found out several months ago that she's now pregnant. So I'm going to be a grandfather for the first time, as will Melinda be a grandmother for the first time. And that's something that's wanted to share.
Well, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ellen Greenwood. Those of you who do know me and know that as well as being an active member of Westside, I, for many years, have been an active member of a group called the Thursday Hikers, because every Thursday we go hiking. And I've been a member of this group, I think, since the mid-90s. For a long time, you know, when I was still working, I could only go in the summers when school wasn't in session. But since I retired, I've been there every Thursday. But when a group spends one day a week together over that long a period of time, you become very close and a bit like family. And one of our very, very longtime members passed away this week, and that is a loss that we all feel very deeply. So I'd like to light a candle to celebrate the life of Bill Little. Bill was sort of he did not lead hikes, but he was the organizer of our group. So he took care of the email list. He was there just about every week, lined us up, took our picture, had us count off. We're famous for counting off at the beginning of a hike, and we never count off at the end. So, and it was not at all a Unitarian Universalist sort of group. Then he would lead the safety prayer, which usually worked, but not always. We celebrated Bill's 90th birthday last June. For the last few months, he had health issues that kept him from showing up for quite a while, he would just show up and walk up a mile or so each week, but hadn't been able to do, do that in a while, but he was still actually doing quite well physically and passed away peacefully in his sleep. So it was a wonderful way to go. And he wrote, you could tell he wrote his obituary, and he said, "Bill Little has led a wonderful and exciting life." And
all right, I do have one thing that I'm going to share. I'm going to share this as a joy. Curtis, who is one of our online participants, part of our congregation, has let me know there is an upcoming Side with Love series that is going on. It actually starts January 29th. It's 3 sessions on Sunday. It's talking about reproductive justice and kind of continuing those conversations on love. So if that is something you are interested in, let me know. I'll forward you the email. Anyone online can reach out to me or Curtis, and we can get you that info too. So please, if you're interested, let us know.
Hi, I'm Mary Frances Milligan, and oh gosh, he's already covering his face. So I am going to brag on my oldest son, Starry Milligan. He recently turned 18, so I've managed to usher someone into adulthood. No, but he's also been accepted into all 4 universities he applied for, so I'm really proud of him. And he's going to have a great future, so thank you.
Awesome.
I have another joy I'll share for myself. I'm really excited for all the things that we're doing here at the church, and seeing new people each week makes me really happy. So thank you for those who are coming, and the people online. We got up to 12 views right now, like 12 people watching. So hi to you guys as well, and that just makes me really happy. So there's a joy for us as well.
I'm just going to light one more candle, if there are no more that you want to share, just in memory of Mary Ann Barnhart, whose life we celebrated yesterday here. She was a wonderful part of the community for a very long time, and she will be missed, but as we said yesterday, she leaves such sweet, sweet memories behind. So, whether or not we want to admit it, love is the spirit of this church. Love is the center of everything we do. We're going to sing one more song together. We're going to sing number 131 in your hymnal, Love Will Guide Us. It's a little jazzier. And it's about, no matter what comes, there really is that one thing that you can turn to when things are the hardest, and that is love. So I invite you to rise, embody your spirit, and join with us in singing Love Will Guide Us.
Inside us, with the
So I invite you to remain standing. Okay, now you can show your love at this moment any way you like by smiling, holding hand with a neighbor that you're close to and feel safe touching. You can hug your child. You can be like, I am standing in my individuality. I'm coming back here and I'm holding Joey's hand. All right. So, there's a balance between risk and caution. There's a balance of love. It is okay to just hold hands with the people you know. That is perfectly okay. And if you feel like you want to hold hands with people you don't know, that's okay too. The whole point of love is that you get to make the choice that's right for you with the respect and the honoring of those around you. Covenantal relationships, whether they be between partners, friends, family members, communities, or agape towards the whole world, covenant means that we get to be true to ourselves in the spirit of love. So I invite you to practice that this week. As you go into the day, into the week, into the world, try out a little bit of agape as you're being bombarded with the arrows that will be coming from your television. Just experiment a little bit with agape, and I send with you the love of all that is Westside. Go in peace.